Hi, everyone. Give it just a second to let everybody in. All right, welcome to CNS Connect webinar series. My name is Amy Smith, and I'm the Director of Certifications for the ANA and the BCNS. And today I am joined by Sunny Brigham, who's going to share her expertise on steps to identify and accept your imposter syndrome. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A, and Sunny and myself will keep an eye on those. If you are a CNS, as a reminder, you can earn 1 CE for today's presentation. I will put a link at the end for a survey. Make sure you complete that to get your certificate. So Sunny is a clinical nutritionist as well as a business coach and BCNS supervisor with the Nutrition and Herbal Collective. Sunny specializes in thyroid and Hashimoto's disease and has her master's in nutrition, a post-bachelor's certificate in herbal studies, and an MBA. Sunny enjoys helping new nutritionists learn about nutrition, building their private practice, and loves to see them soar. Prior to becoming a nutritionist, Sunny spent 20 years in the U.S. Air Force. She's married with 3 grown children, has 3 dogs, and enjoys traveling the world. So thank you so much for joining us today, Sunny. I will turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Amy. All right. So just before I start sharing the screen, well, I can go ahead and do that and try to talk the same time, which probably doesn't typically go very well, for me. Okay, so we don't have a lot of slides tonight. Normally when I do these things, I have a ton of slides and a lot of different things to talk about. But tonight, so I've got some slides and some information for you, but really, and I say tonight, but today, we're going to kind of have a little bit of a conversation. I know that's it's more of a one-sided conversation with you all typing in the chat. But I want you to really put your thinking caps on as we kind of go into this topic, because it is a really important topic and it is something that a lot of people struggle with. As your questions come up, please pop your questions in the chat box, and then I was missing my chat box. There it is. As you have questions that pop up, go ahead and post your questions in the chat box and I will answer them as they come up. Or if there's something that sparks a discussion from you, or if you have a comment, definitely put it in there as it pops up, because if you save it for later, sometimes those really important questions or pieces of information that you want to share, we tend to forget, or at least I do. So as they pop into your mind, go ahead and put them in the chat box. All right, so obviously we are talking about imposter syndrome. And what we're going to talk about is we're going to go a little bit into what imposter syndrome is, how it shows up for people in their day-to-day life, and how it shows up for clinicians, whether you're an herbalist, a health coach, a massage therapist, a personal trainer, a nutritionist, whatever it happens to be that you are, how it can show up for you as you venture into your practice, whether that's private practice or whether that's working in a functional nutrition clinic or with other practitioners. Maybe you're in a cohesive unit with other people to kind of ping some stuff off of. Nobody's really immune to imposter syndrome. And so it can really show up in a lot of different places. So we're going to talk about, what it is, how to identify that it's happening to you, and some things that you can do to accept it. And I say accept it because I am a firm believer that imposter syndrome is not necessarily something that we can just, overcome. It's more of learning how to identify, accept, and work through it, and learn to become one with it, learn to live with it on a day-to-day basis so that it's less intrusive to you in your everyday life. All right, so I wanted to throw this quote in here because I think most people know who Maya Angelou is. I've written 11 books, but each time I think, oh, they're going to find out now. I've run a game on everybody and they're going to find me out. Everybody deals with imposter syndrome, including the great and amazing Maya Angelou. Okay, so what is imposter syndrome? If I'm looking to my left over this way, it's because my notes are over here and I want to make sure that I include all the pieces of information that I want to. So in 1978, the imposter phenomenon term was coined. And here is, and you can jot this down, and actually what I can do is I can put it in the chat for everybody. That way everybody can have it. You can kind of copy it and click on it. If I can find out where my Zoom is. There it is. So I'll put it in the chat for everyone. And that way you kind of have access to it. So this is one of the really first, and this is Sci-Hub. So if you're against Sci-Hub, I apologize. Visa.net/10.37. This is a long number. Okay, so it's in there for everybody. You can kind of copy and paste it and save it for later. And this was one of the really first research articles that was done on imposter syndrome, or imposter phenomenon is what it was called in the research article. And this was, the research was published in the journal called Psychotherapy, Theory, Research, and Practice. So it's a very old, well, I say very old, it's as old as I am, research article. And what it was is they basically attributed imposter phenomenon to high achieving women who felt that they really weren't good enough or smart enough despite being really successful. Some women in the studies had PhDs. They were a part of some really great work centers. And there is a footnote in the research article that says it does reference men. The research article was completed on women or people who identified as women. And there was a footnote that talked about men and how men do also struggle with imposter syndrome. They did note that they felt, based on the research, that they concluded that men struggled less with imposter syndrome than women did at the time of this article. But I don't know if that still holds true today, because I do think quite a few men struggle with imposter syndrome. I really don't think anybody's immune to it, quite honestly. So what are the primary symptoms of imposter syndrome? And when I say symptoms, what are the characteristics that you might find in yourself when it comes to identifying imposter syndrome? So in the 1978 article, the paper notes that the most common symptoms reported during that time were generalized anxiety, depression, lack of self-confidence, and frustration due to inability to meet their self-imposed standards of treatment. Basically, what they felt that they needed to achieve in life. If they didn't achieve that, then they were essentially a failure. Now, there hasn't really been a whole lot of change in what we've identified as the characteristics or the symptoms of imposter syndrome. And there's a couple of extras on there. The ones are that we've kind of noted on top of the anxiety and depression would be setting unrealistic expectations, which I think falls under the frustration due to inability to meet self-imposed standards of treatment, sabotaging self-success, fear of not living up to those expectations. And actually, you see this a lot in your clients. If you have clients that are struggling with making changes, a lot of times it's because they have a fear of not attaining those goals that they actually want to attain, whether that's a weight-based goal or a feeling better goal, or maybe it's they just are really not great sleepers and they're trying to work to create goals around sleep. You're going to see this characteristic of imposter syndrome in a lot of your clients is they have a fear of that change, because what if they don't make that change? What if they're not successful in that particular change? So while you see it in yourself, you'll start to recognize those symptoms, the characteristics in your clients as well. Attributing success to external factors. The paper actually didn't mention this specifically, but it does later in the paper itself. It does talk about how that was one of the attributing characteristics of the study participants of the paper, and undervaluing contribution. So attributing success to external factors. That could be something like, if somebody's like, oh, great job on school, this is really awesome. And you did really well at this particular thing, or a great job on your passing grade, or, your A, or if somebody congratulates you on supporting a client through a really difficult change and you're like, oh yeah, but I had help, or I didn't do it alone, or it was an easy class, instead of just saying like, oh, thanks, I really appreciate that. I did work hard. So we're kind of, one of the characteristics is attributing success to your external factors. Tammy says, considering the environment of the 70s, women's rights movement, equal rights, et cetera, wondering how this paper would be different. I think that's a really great point. And in reading the paper, one of the things that they mentioned that I didn't share that you can all read in the paper, but it talks about the women that typically struggled with imposter phenomenon at the time of the research for this paper. They identified that those women typically grew up in households that had another sibling that was a high performing sibling. And so the expectations that sibling was always going to do well, and maybe that particular, the other sibling wouldn't do as well. So it was, like a surprise when they did great. Or growing up in households where they were really undervalued. And so they got used to feeling like they didn't deserve things, or they didn't work hard enough. And that, I think some of that can still be attributed today, but I also think there's a lot of other characteristics or issues that create this imposter syndrome in people today, whether it's the heightened use of social media and comparing, especially if you're a business owner, right? Comparing how well that your business is performing versus the businesses that you see on Instagram or Facebook, or people talking about their own particular business. And you might think like, oh, wow, well, I'm not doing as great as I thought I was, because so-and-so over here on social media seems to be killing it with all their likes and follows and such. But you only see, what they want you to see of their business. So I think that while in the 70s, the women had those struggles, I think there's, different struggles today as well. I think that there's additional factors today that contribute to a lot of that imposter syndrome that perhaps wasn't there in the 70s, and vice versa. Hannah said, this was absolutely me in my master's program. I didn't get all A's and then didn't feel like I deserved my degree because I didn't know everything. That's so true. And we're going to talk a little bit more about knowing everything. That comes up a lot for a lot of individuals, Hannah, so it's not just you. All right. So imposter syndrome is essentially feeling like you're not enough. You didn't do enough. You're not good enough. You're not deserving enough, despite all of the evidence pointing to the contrary. So if somebody tells you you did this really great thing, and then you kind of brush it off because maybe you don't feel like you did enough, or you weren't deserving enough, or you had external help, or whatever those factors might be, but then they say, but yeah, you did this really wonderful thing. And then you continue with, yeah, but and some people might say like, well, you're just being humble. There's a difference between being humble and internally feeling like you didn't work hard enough, you weren't good enough, you didn't try hard enough, you didn't do enough of those things that you feel like you should have done. Or if you set yourself for the expectation of getting like all A's and you got a B or maybe a C or maybe a D, or maybe you had to pull an incomplete because you got sick or there was family issues. And those are all the things where we feel like internally we've let ourselves down because maybe we've set these unrealistic expectations for ourselves as we go through our journeys, whatever journey that happens to be in life. Okay. Now, no one's really immune. Some really, really prominent people struggle with imposter syndrome. I mean, look at some of these names, right? Like Tom Hanks, like everybody loves Tom Hanks, right? Lady Gaga, Tina Fey, Emma Watson, Michelle Obama, Wolfgang Puck. There was an article where he said, every time I open a restaurant, I feel like it's going to fail. Nobody's going to come to it. There's a lot that goes in there. There's a lot of thoughts that he has in reference to when he's opening a new business. The list just goes on. And these are some of the more common names that I pulled out. I mean, there are a ton of people. that have a lot of imposter syndrome. I just listened to it was just a little short news clip. So Andrew McCarthy, who you may or may not know, he was in the movie Pretty in Pink. He was a really big actor in the 80s. He's coming out with a new book called Walking with Sam. Him and his son, Sam, basically walk the Camino de Santiago, which is a very long hiking pilgrimage trail in Spain. And in the interview clip, he was talking about when he rose to fame in the 80s, he felt very undeserving of it. He had a lot of imposter syndrome that he had to get through. He felt like he didn't deserve the money that he was earning, or he didn't deserve to be in the films that he, basically won through, trial and error, or, what's the word I'm looking for? Auditioning for. So I think that really, I don't think that there's any particular, whether it's women or men, I don't think that anybody's really immune to it. And I don't honestly know if your particular upbringing is the cause of it. I think there's a lot of factors that go into the creation of imposter syndrome. Okay. So you can see, obviously, that some really successful people struggle with imposter syndrome. Nobody's really immune to it. It's our own thoughts that start to make us feel that way, that we're undeserving of the achievements that we have received. I have met so many people in the health field coming across through interns, clinicians that have been in practice for 15 and 20 years, people that have a ton of knowledge, and people just coming out of school, people that are teaching others, that all struggle with imposter syndrome. The problem lies in that most people don't actually know what imposter syndrome is, or they don't understand that the feelings that they're having, or the thoughts that they're having, or the things that they're doing are actually a form of imposter syndrome. So I'm going to stop sharing for a minute. And I just want to kind of chat a little bit, and we can put this in the chat and I will read them out, and we can kind of go a little bit back and forth. But I want you guys to share with me some of the different ways that you've identified potential characteristics of imposter syndrome in your day-to-day life. And then what we're going to do is we'll go through a whole list of different ones, and how it can show up in your business. So you can share whether it's school, like Hannah shared, or whether it's in starting your business or helping clients, or just in your day-to-day life, anything that you want to share. And I can start. For me, I definitely set unrealistic goals for myself. I used to think that I was a bit of a, I used to call it overconfidence, right? I would say like, oh, I'm definitely overconfident in these things. I go into these things like setting these really big, lofty goals for myself. And I think that people should set big goals for themselves, but these were like really big goals that I was never in a million years going to attain. And then if I didn't attain them, I would always feel a little disappointed in myself. Like maybe I wasn't good enough, or maybe I didn't do this thing really well. So that's kind of how that's one of the ways my imposter syndrome shows up. Let's talk, well, okay, so what about, I can start this off. Tammy said, I tend to over-question myself, knowledge, abilities, skills. I question if I'm doing them right and compare myself to others. That is a really great characteristic of imposter syndrome. It's a strong one. And thank you for sharing that, Tammy. I think a lot of clinicians, whether they're new clinicians or growing clinicians, is definitely a win. Yay, you want a characteristic of imposter syndrome. It's a really common, I was going to say a really common win. It's a really common characteristic of imposter syndrome, because I see this a lot in people as they're really helping others, right? So if we apply this, I tend to question myself, my knowledge, ability, skills. And we apply this to helping others in healthcare, right? Whether it's in a nutrition aspect, an herbal aspect, massage therapy, whatever it happens to be, is you want to help others, right? And often what I see is people will over prepare for sessions. They will feel like I have to do the research. I have to know everything. I have to have all of the answers. Otherwise, that other person will feel like I'm not a good enough clinician for them. They chose incorrectly, and I'm not going to be able to help them because I don't want to answer a question with, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. And sometimes, so the over preparation of that can make us feel like we're not good enough in what we do. We're not deserving of the titles that we have. We shouldn't be out here in the world professing that we know how to do these things, when in the background we're really questioning, do we really know how to do these things? Do we really know how to make those changes? Can we really motivate people? Can we really help them? What if they ask me a question? I don't know the answer. Like, I have to research everything. I have never helped anybody with this particular problem before. So let me spend 7, 8, 10 hours researching this topic so that when I go into the session, I will know everything they could potentially ask me. So we're over preparing for those sessions, or we're over preparing so that we feel like we're going to be good. We're going to live up to their expectations. Haley said, in project work, spending way more time than needed and leaning into perfecting everything so that any gaps in my knowledge don't show up in work. And that is a really common thing. And we see this a lot with putting things out into the world. I see a lot of nutritionists or herbalists struggle with this, right? They don't want to put anything out into the world that they don't feel is perfection. Because if you put something out into the world that people don't feel is perfect or perfection, then they will perceive that others will judge them for their imperfections, or they will perceive that others will think they don't actually know a lot about what's going on because they made this mistake, or they misquoted this, or their layout's a little weird, or maybe they didn't fully explain what they really truly wanted to in that handout or your website or a public talk or a presentation that you want to do. What's funny is just before we hopped on or started recording, I was telling Amy was asking about the slides, because I'm going to send her the slides so that she has them after to send out to everybody. And I said, well, I like to go through them live because I'm probably going to catch a spelling error. I am really horrible when it comes to proofreading my own things. And I used to, I would proofread, step away, proofread, step away, proofread, step away. And then I would have my husband look at things as well to make sure that literally everything was perfect, because I didn't want to have a grammar error. I didn't want to have a spelling error, because I didn't want people to perceive me as, well, she misspelled the word doing. She's clearly not smart enough to help me with those things. And so I think the perfectionism is definitely a common struggle. Let's see. Yvonne says, Tammy and Hannah, I'm struggling with it now in supervision and did not in school. Almost like now that I graduated, I should know more. And that makes me feel like I'm not good enough at this. And that's a really, really common one as well, Yvonne. I think a lot of interns that are in supervision feel that way. I honestly think a lot of practicing clinicians feel that way as well. I think it's funny because when I went to school, I felt like I knew a lot about nutrition. Like, I already knew a lot of, I don't know what school's going to teach me. Like, I know everything there is. All school did is teach me that I literally know nothing about nutrition. Like, I knew nothing. Coming into this, I knew nothing. I was way more confident about my knowledge before I went to school than I was after I went to school. And I think one of the things that's really important to remember is that while people will say that they're experts in a certain thing, nobody's really truly an expert, because to me, an expert means that you know everything. There's nothing else to learn in that area. And in reality, everybody's learning. We are all learning. And I think it's okay to tell somebody that I don't know the answer to that. Well, I don't think it's okay. I know it's okay to tell somebody I don't know the answer to that. And I will share that in my client work, the clients that I was truly honest with and said, you know what, I have never dealt with that before. I would love it if I could take your case and share it with a colleague and we could kind of comb through it together. And to me, that's me telling them, like, I don't know this. I'm not good enough. I can't help you. But to them, they're like, yes, you're going to get more people to look at my case, and I don't have to pay more people. And you're going to have more, eyes and ideas and thoughts to share with me about how I could potentially get better. So you have to kind of look at both sides of it when you're thinking, I don't know enough. And I think a lot of times interns compare themselves to other interns. And it's like in business, right? You can't compare your business to those businesses you see on social media because you don't have all the facts, you don't have all the knowledge. On the face of it, everything looks good, but behind the scenes, they could be, treading water and really struggling in their business. And so your journey as an intern is unlike other people's journey as an intern. No two journeys are the same. Julia, I totally resonate with the perfectionism, Haley. And then there is this fear that when what I ultimately produce just isn't up to par, despite all the excess preparation work. So something that really helped me, and this may potentially help you, I don't know, but one of the things that really helped me is, while you all know a lot about health information, whatever health field that is, right? To me, it helps me if I tell myself, well, I may not have all the answers. Often I know a little bit more than the client, or I know where I can research to find those answers. I have a community of people that I can reach out to support me with the help of the client. The one thing that I know unequivocally, hands down, every single time that I can offer everybody that I talk to is my ears. I can listen to them and I can truly hear them, and I can let them know that I'm here for them. And so you don't need a lot of knowledge for that, right? You don't need all the answers that come out of the books or the research articles to be empathetic to your clients. And sometimes that's all people want, is they want somebody to hear them because they've been dismissed so much, or they're so hard on themselves already. Sometimes they just want somebody to say, it's okay. It's totally okay. Your feelings are valid. It's okay. There's a podcast. Let me see if I can Google it for you real quick. There's a podcast called, and I share this with a lot of people, it's called Getting Comfortable with B- Work. And it's by Brooke Castillo, and she is a life coach. And I think it's a really great podcast for people that are struggling with the perfectionism piece. And I'll put this in the chat for you so you can grab it and save it and listen to it later. So the ones that are really focused on the perfectionism aspect of it, and perfectionism truly is an imposter syndrome piece, it can definitely prevent you from moving forward in life, your business, your personal life, helping clients. It can stop you in your track because it's going to make you feel like, I can't do this because it's not up to my own standards. And my own standards are unrealistic expectations for myself. And so if you get comfortable with B- work, because you have to put things out in the world, right? If you truly want to help people, you have to put yourself out there. You have to put things out there. You have to put items that you produce out into the world. And if you think to yourself, well, I would like to put A+ stuff out there. But if you focus on B- work and putting B- work out there, that B- work is A+ to somebody else. While it's B- to you, it's A+ to a lot of people. And we have to remember that, because if we only focus on our own unrealistic expectations of what A+ is, we're probably not going to produce the things that we truly want to produce. Sharon says, I've really struggled with feeling inadequate helping others because I have my own health struggles. Even though I have a lot of knowledge and experience, I feel like I have to have my own stuff all figured out at first. You are not alone. Oh my goodness, the amount of times I have heard people say this, especially if they have, let's say they help individuals overcome the very thing that they struggle with, right? So let's say you're a menopausal woman. Now, Sharon, I don't know you, so I'm just giving an example here, right? So let's say you're a menopausal woman and you're really struggling with hormone imbalance, and you have learned a lot of information that's just not out in the mainstream. And you also want to help women struggling with hormone imbalance, starting with like perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause range, right? So we're talking like 35 to 55. So the big span of women, right? And you're thinking to yourself, I haven't fully balanced my hormones. Like, can you really do that? Like, I still struggle with some hot flashes from time to time, or I still struggle with kind of the ups and downs in the mood, or maybe my hair is starting to come out, or, maybe I'm still struggling with a little bit of constipation, or my cholesterol is higher than I want it to be, which are all common issues with going into or through menopause. Because you don't have it figured out for yourself doesn't mean that you can't help other people. It doesn't mean that you don't have answers for them, because your journey is not their journey. Your journey is different from their journey, just like all of your clients' journeys are different. So just because you don't have all of your answers figured out doesn't mean that you're not able to help other people. And just remember, you always have that one thing to offer that doesn't take any knowledge at all, and that's just listening to them. Nicole says, I tend to struggle with how much to charge clients. Although I've been working with clients for a while, I worry about how much I charge. I think that's a really common one as well, because people think I don't know enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not practicing long enough. People aren't going to want to pay me time to just sit there and share with them the things that I've learned, especially when the majority of the things we learn can be found out on the interwebs, right? Like, anything that I share with the people that I help with hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, people can literally find out on the web. They can learn how to read research articles. They can subscribe to other practitioners. They can take courses. They can do everything that they want to do in order to help themselves. So what do I bring to the table? And why are they going to pay me to tell them these things? And what you bring to the table is you. You are a unique individual, and you are different than them helping themselves. I am a firm believer that practitioners can't really solve their own problems. I think that practitioners need to reach out to other practitioners to help them with their own, because when you're in it, it's hard to see truly what's going on. You can't really have an objective view of what's happening with your own body when you're so in the weeds of what's happening to you. And so what you charge is really that objectivity, right? It goes back to listening, right? We can always listen to clients, even if we don't have all the answers for their particular case. And so what you charge is you're charging for your time, your effort, your energy, your research skills, the ability to listen to them, to think objectively, to put the pieces together that they may not have been able to do themselves because they're so in the weeds. And when it comes to charging, at the end of the day, you have to be comfortable with what you charge. There's a lot of talk about, I have to charge this amount, or I need to charge this amount, or this practitioner's charging this, so I need to charge more, or I need to charge less. It really makes no difference what you charge, as long as you're comfortable with that number that you provide. Because if you're talking to somebody and you're like, I can do this and we can talk about this, and you're asking them how they're doing, you're on your strategy or discovery call, and you get to the point when you're like, I charged $300 for the initial consultation. That's not confidence in the number that you put out there. So the number itself doesn't make a difference. The number that you're confident in, I think, is what matters most. But you have the knowledge. You definitely should get paid for what you do. Hannah says, honestly, now that I finished my 1,000 hours, I feel so much more confident in assessments and initial recommendations because I just had to complete them. I feel the most confident when people are asking me questions because I've developed the ability of letting them know I don't know yet. Focusing on the basics of what they are eating, insulin resistance, inflammation, et cetera, is really the foundation of most clients. Sometimes you just have to do it. Also, I've been finding less is more with many clients who are easily overwhelmed. When I give them all the recommendations, they get overwhelmed. Yes. I love everything that you're saying, Hannah. I love that you've learned these things about yourself. And I think that you hit on a really important piece. And I see this often, is that we want to help our clients, right? We want to help them feel better and get better. And a lot of times, many of the clients are very, very desperate in where they're at. And they're thinking, I need to do all these things. I want to do this, and this. I need to feel better now. And we feel like we need to deliver that for them. We feel like, okay, I have to do this. I have to help them feel better. I have to help them. And so as we're talking, we want to do this for them, and let's add this supplement, and let's do this food change and this food change and this lifestyle change and this sleep change. And by the end of the conversation, you've got 6 or 7 different things for people to do. And oh, by the way, you want to see them in 3 weeks again. That is a lot for people to do. And you have to put yourselves in their shoes. Again, this is where the listening and the empathy comes in, because if they're so desperate to get better, but they're talking about how stressed they are and how little sleep they're getting, and they just don't have the time to prepare and cook and do all these things that we want them to do to help them on their health journey. We have to make sure that we are helping to reduce the load of the stress, because we don't want to add stress on top of stress where we don't need to stress them out even more. So less is definitely more. I love that you've discovered that for yourself. Oh, I love that, Tammy. Health practice, not health perfection. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, that's amazing. Christina, I think admitting that you don't have an answer, but will look for one, helps to foster trust in a therapeutic relationship. It's hard to admit, but there is strength in it. There absolutely is. The host of the B- Work podcast, again, I put it in the chat. It's Brooke Castillo, and I'll take that out here. Brooke Castillo, and she is a life coach. It's a really, really great podcast. Your B- work is A+ to someone else. Yes, absolutely. Also value, and also the value of just being an empathetic listener. I cannot overemphasize that, because a lot of people just aren't listened to, whether it's their family members. Like for me, the population that I work with, fatigue is a really, really big symptom, right? But fatigue is not a visible symptom. You look fine, but you're so exhausted. And friends and family and colleagues, they just don't understand how overwhelming that feeling of fatigue can be. So sometimes just listening to somebody and saying, yeah, absolutely, you are exhausted. I mean, I'm not going to ask you to do more things that you can't physically do. So let's work on that fatigue so that you have more time to do, or you have more energy to do these other things. So sometimes just listening to them is, instead of like, well, just eat better. It's so much easier said than done. Tammy says, this is what I do, perimenopausal work. And I do work with women during this stage. It's perfect. It is definitely a growing field. And I love that it's a growing field, because there's just not enough information or research on the perimenopausal, menopausal woman. Once you start seeing results, that is definitely a huge confidence booster. Definitely, definitely. I have heard health practitioners in the eating disorder field criticize other health practitioners for looking like they are still in their disorder, and what isn't said is, and they shouldn't be practicing. My imposter syndrome can get triggered by having witnessed this. You don't want to be criticized by not appearing perfect. I think that that is a little shameful, quite honestly, on practitioners criticizing other practitioners for their appearance, because I think that people sometimes undervalue the impact that genetics can have on a body, right? So individuals can come in all shapes and sizes. And a lot of times that doesn't have anything to do with our eating habits or patterns. You can have a really, really, really amazing diet and still be overweight by, societal standards or the BMI scale, or you can have a horrendous diet, absolutely horrendous diet, and be, an 18 BMI and be what we would consider underweight, even though that person eats a lot and works out a lot and, is very healthy. That's their genetics. So everybody's a little bit different in that. And I think that, quite honestly, is a little shameful of what hearing that happens. I'm going to put that in the chat. So I just posted it one more time. The link is amyporterfield.com /2018/06/217. So I just put it in the chat one more time for the link to the Brooke Castillo podcast. Yeah, they're really, Hannah said, there's some really great Facebook groups like the CNS group or Functional Nutrition Forum that are great for getting ideas and discussion. Oh, Kiara says, I'm not seeing Sunny's posts in the chat. I don't know why. Why is that?
Oh, I just realized I think you're posting it to just me. Here, I'll go back through and let me, no wonder no one's seeing that. Here, I'll go back through and post it. Sorry about that.
No, I got it figured out.
Okay.
I was posting it to hosts and panelists. Sorry for all the messages, Amy.
Right, but not good for everyone else.
Yeah, I apologize. Thank you for everyone for pointing that out. Okay, so hopefully everybody has that now, that podcast. Okay, so let's go back to my slides, and we're going to talk a little bit more about different ways that imposter syndrome comes up, even though we just really talked about a lot of different ways. And I think that you'll see some ways in here as well. Let's see. Okay, so self-doubt about your knowledge, experience, education, or your abilities, right? I think we talked a lot about that. People saying that I was in school or I have experience, but I don't know enough yet to help other people. Perfectionism, afraid to launch something or put products out into the world because it's not quite perfect. And just remember your B- work is A+ to somebody else. Limiting your client base to only see people you either feel superior to from a knowledge standpoint. And personally, if I find a person intimidating, I don't always want to work with them because I feel like they can often see right through me and find out that I'm a fraud. So this is something that I have to work on, is if I feel like I can't help that person, or I feel like I'm intimidated by that person, it's totally not anything that person has done, but it makes me feel like I am not going to be bold enough to support them in the way that they need to be supported, when in reality, I definitely can. So limiting your client base to only seeing people that you 100% know you're going to be able to help. So basically not taking on those clients that can potentially be a challenge for your knowledge. Fear of putting yourself out there into the nutrition world or the herbal world or the healthcare world, whatever that happens to be for you. Degrading your knowledge because you don't think you know enough just yet, right? Like I went to school, I did my internship, I'm practicing, but I don't think I know enough just yet, or the knowledge that I have isn't going to be useful to the other people that are out there that need it. I can't share the things that people need me to share, when in reality, you know enough. Hannah said, great point. Also, it's hard to work with clients who are unwilling to listen if they've gone through Dr. Google. So I think this is a really great point, Hannah. Isn't the client that's unwilling to listen because they're Googling their own symptoms, or is it someone that's so desperate to have a feeling of moving in the right direction for their body, or what they think is the right direction for them, that it's hard for them to step outside and allow somebody with an objective view to say, this may not be the right starting point for you. I'm not saying those clients aren't difficult. They are definitely difficult. But we need to know that we can still help them, because sometimes they really just need somebody to take that wheel from them and start driving the car. Degrading your knowledge. Oh, I just did that one. Attributing your knowledge or success to outside factors and not your own hard work and dedication. Feeling like success in this industry is impossible. How will you have a successful practice when there are so many other practitioners out there? Why are people going to choose you? Why would people come to me to help them with their hypothyroid or their Hashimoto's when there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other practitioners and health coaches and doctors and complete functional medicine practices that do the very same thing that I do. Why would they choose me? The answer is me. That's why they would choose me. But we all have approximately the same knowledge. Fear of not meeting your or others' expectations during or after consultations. This goes back to feeling like I'm not going to be able to help them. Feeling like you have to research nonstop in order to have all the answers that your clients may ask you, basically over preparing to make you feel prepared. I think it's always important to remember that your first session with anybody is always exploratory. You never have to have all the answers. And that's for people that are in like an internship, right? Or just in general, sometimes we feel like we have to have all those answers. And I think it's a good reminder that you don't have to have them all. Nobody has them all. Okay, so I am a firm believer that it's difficult to overcome imposter syndrome. And if you spend all of your time, effort, and energy trying to overcome it, you're going to become really exhausted and have less time to do the things that you truly want to do. Identifying your imposter syndrome and learning to accept that that's what it is and working through some steps to overcome it, in my mind, is a better approach. Now, identifying, accepting your imposter syndrome is great to do from a mental wellness standpoint, and it'll help you no longer feel held back. Now, is doing these steps or overcoming your imposter syndrome, is that really going to happen overnight? Probably not. I mean, it's something that people have to work at for years and years and years, just like people that go to therapy for anxiety or depression or trauma or PTSD or any of the other reasons, or just, to vent because they've had a really crappy day. All the reasons that we go and talk to other people or seek other people out to help us, these things don't happen overnight, right? Like, think about your clients. It took years for their body to develop the things that they are struggling with in this moment. It's going to take time for them to help to walk back those concerns or problems that they're having. It's not going to happen overnight. You have to remember to treat yourself like your own client. It's all going to take time. Identifying and accepting your imposter syndrome can help prevent practitioner burnout. And I think this is really important to remember. The more time, effort, and energy that you have to put towards becoming a high achiever when you don't think that you are able to do so are going to lead to very long hours, exhaustive thoughts, and working harder than you can or should, right? So this goes back to that really significant, the perfectionism, the not meeting your own internal standards that you've set for yourself. I can't put anything out into the world unless it's perfect and has no problems and no errors and no issues. Everything has to be amazing for it to go out. That becomes exhausting. It becomes overwhelming, and we have less mental capacity and space to give or to support our clients, our family life, things that are outside our kind of nutrition clinician world. And we have less of ourselves to divide amongst these other things. And so it takes you down the road to practitioner burnout, and practitioner burnout is not a fun place to be. I am not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. So others may have alternative approaches to dealing with imposter syndrome, but I'll just share what's worked for me and what has worked for other people that I have been able to help through just a practice and a business standpoint really as well. So you want to identify the feeling or the action in the moment and how it's counterintuitive to what you're trying to achieve. So if we, let's take the perfectionist piece, right? So if you are, let's say you are getting together a handout that you want to put on your website. So it's a freebie, right? People can download it. They can give you their email address, but it's not just right. And you really wanted to put this up 2 weeks ago, and you've been talking about it, and you're pretty much finished, but you want to review it again, or maybe you want to add a little bit more information, and it's just not quite right. It's not quite where you want it to be, but you feel an immense amount of stress because you haven't put this thing out in the world that you've been talking about and telling people is coming, and it's feeding into your personal life. It's kind of rolling over into that. You're thinking about it. You get up in the morning, oh, I should work on this. It's constantly on your to-do list because it's not perfect. It's not your A+ work. It's not exactly where you want it to be. So identifying that that's what's happening. This is my perfectionism taking over. This is me setting standards for myself that are unattainable. This is me making sure that everything is amazing so that people think that I know everything that I'm talking about. So the moment that you notice that feeling, you want to stop. These are very much in line with the things that we tell our clients when they're stressed, right? What are your symptoms and signs of stress? Do you know how your body exhibits stress? Are you clenching your hands? Are your inner thighs pressed together? Are you clenching your jaws? Maybe you're a table tapper, or, for those of us that have anxiety, we're constantly, picking it here. Or for me, I will twirl my earrings, I'll clip it, unclip it, I pick at my ear holes. So once you start to notice those symptoms of anxiety or stress in your clients, or imposter syndrome for you, we stop. We stop and we notice this thought process or this feeling. We take some time to breathe, whether it's heart rate variability breathing, you're doing a heart math, or your box breathing, or your belly breathing, or you take time to just do a quick meditation, or you just go for a walk, or you just kind of step away from it for a second. Allow your body to relax. Acknowledge that feeling that you're having and notice how it feels in your body, right? And then we want to assess why you think this thought or why you feel the way that you do in this moment. Is there something externally that's contributing to that thought? Is there something that's making you have these thoughts? Is it past things in your previous, I don't want to say past life, but earlier in your days that has caused this feeling or contributing to this feeling? Is it something that's gone on long term? And then you want to respond to it. You want to respond in any way that you choose and however you choose in that moment. You might say, okay, well, I'm not going to put it out there because I'm just not perfect. I'm not ready, even though I did all of these steps, and that's totally okay. It's your paper, it's your freebie, it's your business, it's your prerogative, but you have to accept that that's the choice you made and be totally okay with it. But try to respond in a positive way. You can do some positive affirmations over that thought process that you have in that moment. Something that's opposite to the feeling that you're having in that moment. And if you know anything about neuroplasticity, it's all about rewiring the brain, right? That's why we do positive affirmations, because when we think the bad thoughts, we create those neural pathways on that bad thought. We believe those bad thoughts to be true, and now our body responds to those bad thoughts. So we want to rewire those bad thoughts to good thoughts and think good ways, so that now we start to wire those good ways or those good thoughts, and now our body responds to those good thoughts. But essentially, imposter syndrome is a stress response. It is a stress response to the things that has happened to us. It's a stress response to our thought process that we have. It's our stress response to not feeling like, we're good enough. And some helpful tips, right? And I think this is my last slide. Yes, it is. Okay, so have a list of things that are true about yourself to pull from when you are doubting yourself, right? And you can do this as like a side-by-side. You can take like a piece of paper and fold it in half, and you can put all the thoughts that I have right now, and at the top you can put are not true. All the thoughts that you have about yourself that are not true. And then on the flip side of it, you can have all the thoughts about yourself that are true. So like if a thought about yourself is, I don't know enough to be a clinician, you can put that on this side. But then on the other side, you can put, I know enough to be a clinician, because you do know enough to be a clinician. All you need to have is go back to that empathy, the ability to listen. That's what you need to be a clinician. All the other stuff is important, right? The knowledge, the being able to help people, the reading and dissecting research articles, understanding where you get your information, putting the pieces in the order that was going to work particularly for that client. But the listening is the big piece. So take time to make a list of all the things that are true about yourself, and pull from that list when you're doubting yourself, when you're thinking, I'm not good enough, I need to know more, I haven't researched this enough, I can't help this particular client because I haven't solved it for myself. Who am I to go out here and tell people how to do the things that I can't do for me? So take some time to write those positive things that you know about yourself. And if you are so in it that it's hard for you to pick out those positive pieces, lean on somebody that you trust infinitely to help you create that list of positive thoughts about yourself, the things that you know are true. And be kind to yourself, right? We're just not kind enough to ourselves these days. So be kind to yourself at all times and recognize when you're not being kind to yourself. Work to overcome rumination. Rumination is a big problem. I struggle with rumination. Rumination is a big problem, whether it's focusing on nutrition aspect of it, talk therapy, CBT therapy, whatever works for you. But if you have struggles with rumination, the rumination is going to make that imposter syndrome infinitely worse. Work on creating healthy boundaries around you and things that potentially feed into that imposter syndrome. And don't think of failures as failures. Think of them as learning moments, right? Your failure is not other people's failures. And failures aren't truly failures. They are all moments for us to learn something, right? I could say, I went to give a public presentation and I feel like I marketed it amazingly. And it was a really important topic that people needed to learn and know about, but nobody showed up. I'm a failure. Why didn't people want to come hear me talk? I should just close my business. Like, this is not going to work for me. I don't know what I did wrong. And instead, it's a learning moment. What could I change to market this better to get it in front of the people who need it? Maybe I mass marketed it instead of target marketed. Maybe I could have done something a little bit different. So it's not a failure, it's a teaching moment. And somebody once told me this. They said that there's an analogy, right? So if you're going to climb Mount Everest, as you're climbing Mount Everest, you have these stops that you have to stop at to acclimatize. And sometimes you have to go up and then come back down to rest, and you go up again, and then you come back down. So every step or 2 steps you take up, you typically take 1 to 2 steps back. And everything is like that, right? It happens with our clients. We see it all the time. It happens in our own businesses. It happens with ourselves. And the biggest thing that you could ever do is be kind to yourself, but also identify that this is what it is, and do the same things that you tell your clients to do, is identify, work on your stress response, and move past that. Okay, so that is all I have, and I think we're getting close to time. Christina said, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us about the topic today. So appreciate it. I have to we'll chew on this info for a while. I hope you do. Oh, you're so welcome, Haley. Okay. We have a couple of questions, 2 minutes left. Are there any questions that anybody can come up with or think about, or anything that you have in general?
Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Great. I think it was so needed in a topic that everyone thinks about, but no one really wants to talk about. You know, it's like no one really discusses. So I think it was fantastic. I put the CE survey of for the CNSs in the chat there.
Kiara says an example of how you overcame it recently. Are you asking me like an example of how I overcame a piece of imposter syndrome? Okay, so one of the pieces of imposter syndrome that I shared with you all is that I struggle with taking clients that I feel intimidated by. Like, I feel like maybe I don't know enough pieces of information. And so what I did was I used the list, right? I used the things I'm good at, the things I think I'm not good at, and then the things I know that I'm good at. And whenever I was confronted with and those clients, and there's not a ton of them, but whenever I was confronted with those clients, I would always look at the list of how I knew that I was steadfast in my knowledge, and how I knew that I had the ability to help this person with the struggle that they had. And it truly, I was intimidated because it was my own problem and not them. For a long time, I used to think like, oh, they're just intimidating people, right? But it's not them, that was totally me. So I worked to use my list of the things I knew I was good at. And actually my husband helped me with the list. And then I had some friends also help with the list, kind of contribute to things that I could pull from. And so I used that whenever I was confronted with somebody that I felt a little intimidated by. And more often than not, I was intimidated by their knowledge. I thought that I didn't know enough to help them is essentially what it came down to. It had nothing to do with them as a person or their personality. It was me thinking that I didn't know enough to help them. And in reality, you just have to go back to the listening, right? We can just be empathetic and listen. Oh, you're so welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sunny.
You're welcome. Thank you.
The recording and the slides within a couple days. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. And CNSs, don't forget to do the survey in the chat.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Sunny. Everybody have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye.